big SUV.
Oh, no.
Oh, there's a big red truck with it, so.
Yeah, that would
I
be
wouldn't
Javier.
care. Oh no, I know. I call him Javi. Yeah. But no, it wasn't that.
No, he's got a silver Range Rover.
Okay. Well, I said hi to Roy. It was Roy.
Get your stash over there, huh?
Yeah.
Got your little stash.
Who's wrong? Is he gonna come in today?
I don't know.
Probably not. This morning, he has a doctor's appointment.
They should have like drinks. A little couple there,
Yeah.
But more people would show up.
That's true.
That's true.
But it might get a little unwieldy.
Yes. Yeah.
You think?
I was on a cruise. No, I don't drink, right? But people are drinking. There's no aspersions to anybody here. Okay. I'm getting myself in trouble. But people were drinking in the elevators. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. I mean, they were all having a good time. I don't want to be that grumpy old guy, but I think people get loud.
And louder, yeah. But alcohol helps with that, that's
Yeah,
for
it
sure.
does.
It was my first cruise, so it's like
Would
I'd
you do
never
it
seen
again?
that before. Oh yeah, yeah. We're thinking about doing. Cheryl had a cousin that died in Vietnam, so we're thinking about
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's cool.
doing that.
That would be interesting.
There's a lot to see here in the U.S. though.
Yeah.
I have friends all over the country, so.
Sounds like fun. Hi.
How you doing?
Yeah, you might want to back up.
I was just thinking.
You're like in the lowrider seat.
Feeling self-conscious. What's that?
When you sit in that section, you're on the screen.
Oh yeah.
Like
No,
that.
no, itching your nose.
This morning I was scanning through last night's meeting, looking at just checking a couple things. And see you and Rich were right there the whole time. Which is fine.
Good to know.
So that's why you're there.
Yeah. Stay on the camera.
Stay on the camera.
That's a good idea.
No, it's fine.
Well, I like to be incognito.
They said she's on her way, so we can give her another minute. All right, we'll start in 1 minute. We're waiting for Kristen to join us.
She was waiting at the city hall.
Sorry, we were in the other room. I was told I was in a smaller room or something. I don't know. We're confused. And by default, James and I are.
Whether you like it or not.
Yep, have to drag them around wherever we are. Yes. All right, we will get started. Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the City Port Joint Committee meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order. The time is now 3:36. Madam Clerk, will you please take roll call?
Vice President Jess Ramirez. Mayor Pro Tem McQueen Lejeune.
Here.
President Selena Zacharias. Mayor Perez.
Here.
CEO Port Director Kristen Dekas. And City Manager James Vega.
Here.
We will now hear public comments. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments for this item?
Yes, we have our first public comment from Tom King.
Ready? Okay, Tom King, resident of Port Hueneme. And as I said last night, all due respect to the Bard family, certainly the Port, and Mayor Perez and Mayor Pro Tem and staff. I have a letter that I'd like to read. This was sent to the council members. This is by a resident of 38 years here in Port Hueneme. My talk here has to do with the monument, the proposed monument location at Surfside and Market Street. I've already collected 40 signatures of those people that would be opposed to that location. But my purpose here is to read this letter. Dear City Council, and this would include our commissioners, and I do have permission to read this letter from Ann DiPaolo. Dear City Council, I understand there's a proposal to install a Richard Bard monument in the center of Hueneme Wharf Plaza, located adjacent to the intersection of Market Street and Surfside. I'm opposed to this location for the following reasons. The Hueneme Wharf Plaza is a favorite spot for small weddings, celebrations of life, exercise groups, religious gatherings, etc. Placing a statue smack in the middle of takes away the space for this. People enjoy the campus that is in the center of the flat work. If you stand in the middle, you can hear an awesome echo, too. Please don't crowd the space with a monument. There's a pedestal monument already erected at this location. Please put the statue at Bubbling Springs Park or the port's main gate, where it will be less likely to be tagged. And Apollo, Main Sail Court, Port Hueneme. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Greg Ross.
Hi, good afternoon again. Greg Ross, I live on Sea Spray Way in Port Hueneme, a longtime Ventura County resident. I was here a couple weeks ago, and I promised a video that I sent to Mr. Vega, and I hope you got that. I'm not here for show and tell, but I did this yesterday. This is what came off my screens that were cleaned 3 weeks ago. So you can see. So backing up to the video for a second, the video was taken on March it was either 25th or 26th of this year. And it was a video taken by one of my neighbors. It was a roll-on, roll-off ship that, you know, and I'm going to get to the issues the port has right now, that it's challenges, I'll put them that way. But this ship obviously had its diesel engines fired up, and there was a substantial amount of black smoke coming out of its smokestack. And then again, on April 11th, I did not take a video, so you can either take my word for it or not. I saw a similar situation with another Ro-Ro with its engines full blast and a lot of black smoke coming out. Now, I know there's a lot of challenges before the port with the floods on December 1st, or 21st, sorry, of last year. And I know that there's, they're working hard on January 1st, 2025. It can't come quick enough for us. And you'll be able to hopefully have equipment in place to capture the pollution that we're talking about. The reason this is present in my mind is when we moved in, there were no homes available in this neighborhood. It was like the luck of the draw that we even got there. But the two people that lived there, the reason it was up for sale is their sons and daughters had to put it up for sale because both of the individuals in that house sadly died of cancer. And so then I started asking around, and I think there's as many as 8 or 10, and I'm sorry to be a little vague, documented cancer victims in our neighborhood. So it's a concern, and that's why I'm here. Just quickly to give you an update, because I don't want to sound like I come up here and just reiterate. Our update is that we're getting a lot closer to having pollution equipment there in our neighborhood. That's a pretty high density area along Surfside with the condos and the apartments and the homes. So we're looking for that information. We don't have it yet, but we're getting there. So that's my update. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. We will now move on to approve the February 12th, 2024 minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve?
Move to approve.
A second. Thank you. Madam Clerk, take a vote, please.
Was that President Zacharias that seconded?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. And we will go on to our discussion, which is the first item up for discussion is the Bard Monument update.
Mayor, if I may. We were going to have a visioning workshop yesterday to go through some of these things, and unfortunately, 2 commissioners were unable to attend, so we delayed that meeting. But we would ask to table that. We've been cognizant of some of the questions that the community has and that we are exploring internally as to strategically how to celebrate the life of the Bard family and honor that, at the same time respect the will of the community. And so there was some discussion at one point of doing a survey, but we're kind of leaning perhaps towards the possibility of just putting it on our own property. So we just need to have that discussion at the board level.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could, so I think to address maybe the public comments and everything, the assurance we can give the public is that if it were to move forward on city property, it would come back to a meeting, I think is.
And a survey, right?
Yeah,
That's
and there was going to be a process and
Yeah.
a survey.
otherwise-
So it sounds like it likely won't go in that direction, but I think the assurance for everybody today is there won't be a decision made outside of the public purview. So.
Okay, is there any further
I
discussion?
do actually, the gentleman, Mr. Tom King, had a copy of a survey, a draft survey. I want to reassure him that that was the draft of what we put together, but that the city was then given instructions for them to put it together.
Yeah, so that draft survey was presented to the council, and every time we present something to the council, it has to be shared with the public. So just so everybody understands, that wasn't intended to be a final survey. So, yeah, thank you. Got it.
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you.
Okay, thank you. So the next item is the Community Benefit Fund projects. We're going to discuss and provide some recommendation. Who wants to start that off?
Well, I think if I may, we did put a PowerPoint together just to kind of delineate the process. So kind of just some reminders on the Community Benefit Fund, how it works, and then get into some discussion on process. And I have a PowerPoint.
And there it goes.
Do I, any tricks to, oh, you'll bring that to me, okay. These are nice. Okay. So just to kind of walk down memory lane a little bit, just because of why we're here and what CBF is all about. It's always good is before we go into the next year, and I know we have some new leadership too, just to make sure everybody's on page of where and how this all evolved. And it kind of goes back to the very basic statement that I think we both embrace, or we have when we were in Washington last year, that there's no commerce without community, and there's no community without commerce. So I think that's just a nice demonstration of how important we are to each other, and how collaborative and constructive and productive relationship we can have and share and embrace. So we've had a long legacy of working together. These slides are somewhat old, but this is just something I put on here because we do share this on our website, so the community can come out and access and learn more about CBF. But it just kind of showcases how we can work together. And this is actually directly out of an editorial that I wrote about how important collaboration is in working together from labor to community to customers and all the other things that come into play with commerce and community. A little bit about the formation of the CBF. There was some legal questions that we had and we sorted out. And it resulted in a new document trying to settle some of the question marks that were in the former revenue sharing agreements. There are three of those. There's 1983, and 1987, and in 1995. And there were things like port revenue shared funds would be used to widen Panoma Street. We know that's not going to happen. So when we went into this settlement discussion, or this settlement agreement in 2015, we tried to resolve a lot of those question marks, and we wanted both parties to come out of it feeling good, and feeling like we both had some wins and that we're going to move forward with a very collaborative and open, transparent public process. So one of the things that happened at the time was the NCL property was leased to the port. That lease came back to us at an amount of around $1 million that helped with some budget shortfalls that the city was having at the time. And then we also came up with this concept of a community benefit fund. And the concept was to have the two bodies, the port and the leadership of the port, with the commissioners and the leadership of city council, with the council members, come together and really figure out how we could work together in a spirit of partnership and have some serious goodwill moving forward, and put this, some of the disputes that we had behind us. And so we came up with this idea of a community benefit fund, and if the port makes more than $13 million a year, $100,000 goes into a restricted account, and this body convenes, we start discussing some ideas, and then it goes back to the boards for vote and consideration. So just at the very root of when this evolved, the idea was to build bridges between the city and the port to have a very collaborative and constructive relation moving forward, and come up with different ways that we could, participate in doing projects for the community together. Since that time, there's been some questions of whether the Community Benefit Fund is the right name for it, and that's something this committee might want to take on. Is it really more of a city-port partnership fund? So it makes sense if you're doing something like a statue or a mural or whatever, some of the things that we've talked about before, it might make more sense in understanding that. Why is it coming out of this body through discussions at the discretion of this body? Well, this is why. It was a way to have that partnership and work together, collaboration, and that true spirit of leadership coming together to do some good. So in terms of process, I think I'm going to jump to another slide that will outline that a little bit more in bubbles and easier to understand. But this is what was spelled out in terms of what's eligible for funding in the settlement agreement of 2015. So shoreline protection was called out, community development, opportunistic endeavors, and other projects. So I think there was a lot of thinking to keep it an agile and flexible, so you could work at the time of what's relevant, right? Would kind of not be hamstrung to something that in 2015 might make sense, but in 2024 does not. So I think we have a lot of flexibility with the way these different uses for CBF money came out. So this is some history of where we are today in terms of investment. Over the history since 2015, $1 million has gone into this fund. I think there are some question marks. Our CFO, Austin Young, is in the room working with your CFO to make sure all of that money's been accounted for. They make sure that everything's reconciled, so if the city did indeed spend money on something, that they did get reimbursed for it, or if we got all the money out the door. So we're trying to reconcile that and get it in place. But this is the big picture. This is how much money has gone into this since it was initiated in 2015. This is the 22-3 recipients, and again, I think we have some reconciliation work. And if there's one of the other things I think we wanted to talk about today is there's still some direction needed on certain things that were voted, including the scholarship program and also the next race, and kind of get some guidance and direction from the body and how we move forward there, because we voted these great things and then it sits in a spreadsheet and we're like, we need to initiate, implement, and figure out how to move forward on those specific projects. And then this was put together based on, again, some of the thinking behind the CBF was how not only do we do good things in this room together and come up with projects and then go out and get our boards to vote them, implement, and it's that spirit of collaboration, but also get the PR that comes with that, right? And so we've been doing a lot of check events and press events and joint press releases and those sorts of things. So there's still some outstanding projects from previous votes that we still need to do that. So we're going to work with our teams together, and I think the city manager and his teams and our teams are going to get together and kind of sit down and build out that program and have kind of a team building session around these projects that are already in queue. So we've talked about that. But there are still some PR opportunities that are outstanding that we need to tap into. So stay tuned on that front. And then finally, we're moving into the next fiscal year. So we know we made more than $13 million in this fiscal year. So there's going to be an FY24 application for the next budget of FY25. And so the process for this is that we begin these dialogues now in this forum. We formalize the ideas into some projects, and then we take them back to our boards, and it's not fully voted, and there are questions. We reconvene this meeting, but we do have to have consensus 180 days after the turn of the fiscal year, which is July 1. Otherwise, the money will sit for another year for next deliberation. If that happens for 3 years and we can't decide how to spend it, then 50% goes back to the port, 50% goes to the city, and we use it at our own discretion. I've never seen that happen. Since this has happened, we've been able to come to some conclusions here on how to make these investments, but that's just simply the process. So the couple of questions on historically, how do we want to move forward with the next race, I think, or just in the implementation of the scholarship program, if we want to take that on. What projects do we want to look at next year with the $100,000, which our CFSO in the room, there may be a little more than that because of CPIs and compounding of that. I don't know if we have the right number. Do we, Austin?
It will be adjusted based on May CPI number. So May CPI number is not available yet.
Okay.
It will be available sometime in June. So I'm estimating something a little over $130,000 expecting for fiscal year 2024.
And the only thing I'll add, and then I'll turn it over to the leadership for discussion, but in our board meeting yesterday, one of our commissioners did come up with a couple of thoughts that came out of that session, and one was the idea of using the funding potentially for grant writing to help the city. At the May 18th meeting, it came out there's some big heavy lift project needs for the city, and maybe we could apply some of the funding to grant writing to help you in that regard. So that was just an idea, and then the other was the continuation of the DC trip. That was a spotlight. But again, unfortunately, we were unable to have our full visiting session because 2 commissioners weren't there, so we're going to have to go back again in May. And I don't know if either of my board members want to add to that on the meeting yesterday, but there's sort of the process laid out, and then it's the mic is yours.
I do have a question for you, Kristen, please. Is there in writing anywhere that we have whether with the history of this particular committee, what the purpose is of the funds from the Community Benefits Fund?
It's funny you should ask. I was supposed to hand these out. Thank you, Commissioner. So this is what's posted on the website, and this has all the history, the entire history, soup to nuts, of the Community Benefit Fund. Yes. If not,
Georgiana want one?
if there's anyone in the community wants
And the reason I ask that is because I want to make sure also the public understands what the definition of the funds, what the funds are supposed to be used for. And do we revisit it and change that statement, or do we continue with it? Is it working for us? I just want to make sure, because I've gotten a couple questions out and about in the community from folks saying that money could be used for, street repairs. Well, my understanding is that's not what the community benefits funds are for. Or, why are we spending money on this when we have these other needs? So I just want to make sure that people are clear that the community benefits funds are used for one purpose, and then the revenue sharing agreements funds are used for a different purpose.
We have those same questions, actually, and in fact, there was a public comment last night talking about what the community benefit fund is supposed to be used for, so
Okay.
we hear that all the time, actually.
Yeah, it was really to ignite an opportunity for the board and the commissioner after a little bit of a challenge back in 2015 and overcome that with a new spirit of working together, put that behind us and work together in a very strong spirit of doing things that would be good for the community, of course. That's why we called it the Community Benefit Fund, but the decision-making was to be here to build those bridges.
Yes. And last night, we had some council members that did give us a list of what they would like to add to a list, so yeah, or to keep on the list, so.
I brought copies of that. I'm almost hesitant to hand it out because I would call it a brainstorming list. It was
Yeah.
really just like any ideas throwing out there.
Okay.
So I did bring copies. I'll hand it out, but just kind of keep that in mind. It wasn't intended to be, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, we didn't approve it and vote on it and say this
Yeah.
is happening. We just took down notes of what everybody was thinking, and this is the culmination of that.
No, I appreciate that. I think that's a starting point that we could take a look at.
It's to add a little bit of what she was saying is that when this collaboration started back in '83, my thought was that the money was going to be used to enhance the quality of life of members of our community, and I'm talking about yoga classes, exercise, dancing classes, cultural stuff that especially people at my age, our seniors, perhaps we can develop some programs for our senior population, art classes.
That was definitely
exactly on.
requested, art, a lot of, for children, the youth in the community, scholarships.
But see, I'm not so sold on the scholarships because people everywhere give scholarships. I know that. Anyway, again, I go to the enhancing the quality of life our citizens of this community. The fact that we need to fix the roads, I mean, that's essential. But then there's other money, there's other grants, that we can apply for to do that. But that's my bias. Save the money, keep the money, and enhance the quality of life of our people that live in our community.
And I think that a lot of the items you just listed off, Jesse,
Yeah.
Commissioner, they're here on this particular list.
Yeah, but
In addition.
but have we done them though? I mean, we.
Yes,
There-
I think
yeah,
so. I think so.
Boys and Girls Club is a regular recipient. The
Yeah, but Boys and
Explorers,
Girls Club, I mean, they're a national institution. They get funds from everywhere. It's like the United Way.
and the
Can I
Real
have the
Guppies.
PowerPoint back up? Can you put the PowerPoint back
The
up?
Real
I'm sorry. I
Guppies
didn't
is
hear
a local.
No, exactly. Yeah.
The Police Explorers
Yeah.
is local. I'm just talking about the
Yeah,
ones that are
yeah.
have been on the list
Yeah.
for the past few years. Inlaquec,
Mhm.
Yeah.
what has been
Yeah,
on
I
the
have a
list.
I think
Yeah.
this might be helpful.
The Your Lego First robotics competition. I think Audubon Society has been a regular occurrence. Senior programming, which I think it was the caregivers.
If you look at the printout, I don't have it, but you can look, and you can see each year. So the first 2 years I didn't mention, but is out of the agreement, was the discretion of the city only. So 2015 and 16 on the first page, that came completely out of the city's own discretion. And then starting in 2017, it became a joint body decision. But you can see here in 2017, pedestrian crossing, community events, beautification projects, REACH, which probably captures some of those programs, human services, and then you can jump to 2018. We took a different approach to it, and we kind of categorized how the money could be spent. And so that was community homelessness, public safety, park and recreation. We got beds for the homeless, as I recall, in that one. On 2019, we had Winnie 75th celebration, Miranda Park, sponsorships for Cops and Tops, Bubbling Springs Parks, police body worn camera system, GoGov, CMR, dog park. In 2020, you can see a whole list of things here. And so we have caregivers, children's workshop. We had police explorers, cats and cradles at the time. I remember that one. Lifeguard program, so STEM programs, coastal keepers,
So do you
Food
know
share.
specifically 2019 dog park? Obviously, that never happened. Do we know?
So this is where we need to reconcile some things.
Yeah.
We still have $442,000 in the unrestricted account, and there's $1 million that's been approved. So Austin's working with your CFO, because there may be projects that didn't get pushed forward, and there may be projects that weren't invoiced. So it's a great question, Mayor.
Yeah, and as an example, we've been starting to reconcile that, so I have like a draft
Here you can
at
see
that,
it
and
just-
the dog park,
But I still
kicked
don't
in
see
here.
anything
There's
for-
$6,500 that were not spent. I'm assuming the 3,500 maybe was spent to, a design or something like that.
Yes, sir.
But there's 6,500 still that hasn't been spent that probably won't be
Yeah.
spent, or we could pull it into the Bubbling Springs project.
The dog
For the
park.
dog park, yeah. So we'll try to clear all those things up over the next
Mhm.
couple weeks.
That would be helpful to
Yeah.
figure out exactly.
Yeah, and so then if you jump to the 2022 and 23, then you're seeing where we did a lot of, Lego first started kicking in, the Inglacash, Real Guppy has been a big recipient. So all of the projects in this document are also posted on our website for openness and transparency, so you can always go back to. So this is what the two boards approved of over time. Again, there may be some disconnect as to what was pushed forward and what still needs to get reconciled.
So technical question, so once the, this would be for Austin, so once it's reconciled, if there's, I don't know, $300,000 that is unclaimed and wasn't used, we could put it into,
I think they were voted by two governing bodies, so we'd have to look and make sure the projects were dead, so to
Yes.
speak, that they were closed out, and then yes, it would go back in then, in that case, into to be brought forward again with the other funding, yes.
okay, perfect, thank you.
And again, the area on the last one that we still need a little help with, because these were voted, and approved by two governing bodies, wasn't the scholarship program, some discretion around that, and then do we want to plan another race for the fall, or do we want to have one race because the budget was a little bit more than we thought? So some question marks around that as well.
So correct me if I'm wrong, I know we discussed the scholarships, but we did not
Correct.
vote on the scholarships.
No, we
voted
did.
on it. We just never created a process as to how
Process
we were
Right.
going to go about it.
Yes.
Okay.
On the senior programming, I would like to see if any specific programs have been designed by the city as to where some of the money's going.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think for now, the answer is, we did the brainstorming, but we haven't fleshed out exactly what the senior programming is, or there was another category, was it youth programming we had, I think, in
Yeah.
there as well? And those were just kind of general, so that's something that the board here can talk about and identify, or we can come back with a plan for those. But as of right this minute, there's not a program that we're proposing. It's just the idea was to start coming up with that at this point.
On the scholarship one, sorry, it's because on the scholarship one, I think it was actually decided how many scholarships we were going to do, and I want to say it was like,
It's on the screen right now, actually.
Okay.
It was $2,000 towards a reception. and
Yeah,
then
there you go.
$8,000 for 8 $1,000 scholarships.
so that was 20.
But we had talked at that time about, what's how are we going to do the applications and, you know, all those things. And we hadn't ever made a decision. We just put it in
Yeah.
the projects.
So I have to own this. I apologize. We're going to have to update this spreadsheet here and our website because it's not reflecting that $10,000. For some reason, we left it off by accident. So I'll make sure it gets updated.
And as for the senior programming, that would be a good problem to solve through our Parks and Recs, who comes up with senior programming. We have some senior programming that we've started already, so that would be a good place for them to dig into if they knew they had additional funds for that. Is that what you're looking for?
That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Okay, and the
Have to
same
take
thing
care-
with
Have
youth.
to take care of my generation.
His people.
And the same thing with youth programming.
Yeah.
They push out a lot of youth programming as well.
So we
The
can
only
ask them.
just because I've been sitting on this board for a really long time, and so what was important in the last generation conversations around this again is that it's something that's new, not something that's part of the general fund. So there was a lot of, I think there's some extra classes and things that happen with the city and people's pay, but there are people that are on city salaries and things like that. So there was just some questions of how to do it so that it wasn't something, and there was a lot of robust discussion around this, that it wasn't something that should get paid through general fund, and that it's something that's sort of outside the box of the two
Yeah, but
governing bodies.
that's the old generation though. But what if the city doesn't have enough money to implement those programs that service that community?
Right, so that would be a discussion we would agendize in our board meeting, have our full board talk about it and bring it forward to this group. And if that's the case, then yes, we'll move it forward.
I think this list is a good starting list for the conversation. So just technical question for you, Mr. City Manager, is to avoid any city council members saying that it was not discussed or they don't know where this came up, this will be agendized in your meetings and for full discussion at your city council meetings?
This list came from last night's council
Okay.
meeting.
Right, so we
And
have to
so
do
we
the
had
same.
agendized, kind of similar, kind of a
Yeah.
visioning with our council. And these, we didn't get to the point of prioritizing per se, but it was basically everybody start with your ideas and then the committees will
Great.
work together and start whittling them down. So the council members are all aware of it. Nobody should be caught by surprise. It doesn't mean everybody will completely agree with the final decision, but
And we also, they also requested, which we think it's a good idea, before we have any port city committee meetings, we should have it connected to a council meeting so that those individuals can participate and put forth ideas that we can bring to this group. So that's our goal.
Okay.
And unfortunately, we had the same goal, we just had, we had some hiccups in our meetings yesterday, so that didn't come together. But we're rescheduling for May.
So is there anything further that we want to talk on this topic?
Not on that particular topic, but do we want to talk about then to clarify, so we've clarified the community benefits funds and what they can be used for. Can we clarify the revenue sharing agreements? Or is that a different meeting?
So my understanding, James can correct me is wrong, so the part of the settlement agreement in 2015 requires a statement of the investment of the revenue sharing funds that come through the port to the city, which would be some of the great service the city provides to us, whether it's police services or it's paving roads. It's just having the spreadsheet of how the funding was used. And James and I have had some conversation about this, and my understanding is that in the next fiscal year, you'll have a list of proposed projects that you'll bring forward to this committee for our consumption to see how you're proposing to invest those dollars. Not that any approvals are required, but what the thinking and the logic is, and then how we could also somehow showcase those investments with significant amounts of dollars. We're talking around $2.9 million next year, how we could help the community understand of that partnership. The city is providing these services to the port because there are these revenue sharing agreements here, and we could spell that out in a water bill or something like that, so there's full awareness of that, of how that's all working. But the revenue sharing agreements are definitely going into the city's general fund. And I don't know if you want to elaborate.
right. I think at last night's meeting, our council meeting, we actually had a very similar topic related to our Measure U fund. And so sort of similar, we have our like general tax revenues and then we have a couple of special revenues, and one of those is Measure U, which is that extra 1 cent sales tax enhancement, where now when we get that tax revenue each year, we're supposed to account for that tax revenue and show how we're spending that tax revenue and that we're spending it in the way that we promised we would spend it. And so yesterday, as an example, was the first time we ever provided that report to the public and the community. And we said at that point it was the first report, but it was retroactive. But moving forward, the goal is to be actually proactive and actually come beforehand and tell people what we're planning to spend it on to allow for the public input on if it's what we should be spending it on. And I see essentially the revenue sharing agreement as almost exactly the same, that the way it was set up should have been a similar process, that each year we find out how much revenue we expect to receive, and then we should be showing how we're going to spend that revenue. And then as part of the I think it's actually in the settlement agreement, as part of it is we are supposed to share that information with the port. So we're planning to do that same thing. We have put together the first retroactive report, but we're working on the budget for next year, and so we're going to be working on the first proactive report. And just in general, probably like the 3 big topics that it seems to be utilized for, and I think it's the intent. I think it matches the intent of the agreement and what everybody would expect. But it's public safety, public works, streets and infrastructure, and then some parks and recreation. So we'll bring those with the detail, and we'll walk through that as part of one of the joint committee meetings. So.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Anything further on that?
I just want to make sure, because we'd had a conversation about the phase 2 of the monuments, and we did not add that to the list when we brainstormed last night.
We did
Was that by
not.
design, or is it
No.
something else?
It was already included in the initial list, but it probably should have been added. But there was some issue, as you know, last night of
Yes.
whether or not someone wanted to proceed with that. But I think it should be included because it's been discussed and it was voted on.
Okay, yeah, I guess my thinking was, do we really want it on the list for now to start working it, or do we want to make a conscious decision to let's work through this current placing of the monument and take that up next year?
Yeah.
So I didn't know.
So I think we should finalize and finish this phase because it's still active, and before we moving on to the next one.
Without putting anybody on the spot, I guess one question, because I think with the council yesterday, it was a public meeting, so we can say this, right? But council yesterday, I would say it was definitely, there was differing opinions on if phase 2 of the monument process is going to be a priority this year, or if we wait, or, is there an opinion at this point from the port of, like, we're still working on phase 1, are we ready to talk about phase 2 of the?
We'll
and
bring
when I'm
that
saying-
back
when
when
I'm
we
saying-
have our visioning.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll
okay.
bring it back. That's good input for us to take that up, and then we'll bring it out. I think it would be great to finish the first phase, just to get that one over the finish line, and we'll discuss that at our next board meeting. And then I know there were some conversations about the Chumash and
Yeah.
Seabees and Navy and some of
Yeah.
the next
Yep.
iterations. So we'll
Yeah.
bring that back, some questions on timing and if that's still a priority.
And just so the public understands, because we're probably starting to talk in like government gibberish, but like when we first approved kind of the monument projects, it was a 3-phased project, with first phase being the Bard Monument, second phase being the Chumash Monument, and third phase being Seabees
I think there are
Monument.
4
I
phases.
alled-
I think one was for the longshoremen and one was for the
Okay.
Seabees.
Okay, so maybe
I'm
in
not
4
sure
phases.
which order,
Yeah.
Okay.
but
The labor.
Labor.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So so at this point, we've only ever talked about really phase 1. So.
correct.
But along the lines of what Mayor Perez said, though, is that money set aside somewhere already? Because it was previously discussed, or?
The
is-
money
I think
for
only
phase
funding
1.
has gone to the 2 art projects. One is the mural, and I think that's another area we need a little direction to, because there's some funding available for that particular effort. And then we also have the money for the Bard statue has been voted and approved, but we don't have the future funding, the phase 2 funding approved. So that would have to be a new project coming forward.
Right, okay, thank you.
So I guess my question, this is the 3rd time I've used the new person card, and Martha's heard all 3. But as the new person, so we've started with a list, And so is the thought that at the next meeting, we start whittling down the list, or are we when do we start whittling, I guess?
So unfortunately, we're a meeting behind you
Oh, okay,
now.
got it. That makes
So
sense.
we do need to have that
Okay.
meeting in May. We'll do some brainstorming. And actually, it's not bad to have your list too in front of us, so we could give some feedback on that as well. But we did have one commissioner that spoke up a little bit yesterday, knowing we're having this meeting today, just throwing some ideas. But again, it wasn't vetted through the whole board. But they were interesting ideas, and I think the DC trip is one that we thought was pretty productive. And there's one for this year already that we don't need to vote. So we have funding from last year's allocation for this year. But if we want to continue that, we'd have to bring in a new project. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So the one other question would be, on any of the existing projects, do we need to nail down any details on those right now? Like, for example, the DC trip, do we want to talk about dates, or are we ready to talk about dates? Or for, there was another, the scholarships. Do we
Scholarship.
want to kind of
Kind
start
of.
talking about the criteria and all that? So,
And how we're going to create that process.
yeah.
Our attorney was going to try and call in, and
He is online.
oh, he is.
Yeah,
I believe they're on Zoom. Do you
Oh,
want me to switch
Ruben,
over?
are you there?
Give me 1 second.
Yes, he texted me.
Oh, hello. Hi, Ruben. I'm just curious on the scholarships. Like, it was already voted by the boards, the boards to, I see Councilmember Martinez is in the room with us. He was part of the generation that helped vote these ones. And the idea was we're going to give out scholarships and then have a graduation type ceremony or a congratulations ceremony at the Channel Islands Museum. And this was vetted by both boards at the time and voted by all boards unanimously. So my question to you is, from a legal standpoint, in terms of process, where does that process get delineated? Does that have to go back through a process conversation with the bodies, or is it something that James and I should hash out with direction already given?
Oops, can't hear you.
Or either you're on mute.
We can't hear
or
you,
we're-
Ruben.
Or something's
Curtis?
on our end.
We can't hear him.
I think it's on our end. Give us 1 second, Ruben. Okay. Can you give us a sound check? Nope, still not
Not
working.
yet. What about you, Joan? If you go off mute, are we able to hear you?
How about test?
Oh, so Joan
okay,
works.
We can hear Joan. Okay, so it might be on your end after all. And while we're figuring that out, we'll introduce Joan is effective May 1st. Joan is our new city attorney.
Oh,
Nice to meet you, Joan.
congratulations, Joan.
Joan Smith from.
Thank you.
Same
Same
firm.
firm, yeah.
Kevin is taking a new position and moving across the country.
Okay, now it says you're on. Now there's a mute button on you.
We'll try this, Ruben.
Okay.
Oh, on speakerphone.
Exactly, yeah.
Feedback loop.
Okay, how's that?
That was
Better.
better.
Okay.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, President Zacarias, commissioners, and Joan, I'm sorry I missed your last name, but congratulations on securing the spot as city attorney. I look forward to working with you and meeting with you. So in answer to Kristen's question, I mean, it sounds as if you're going to try and go the CBF route, that process is a little bit cumbersome for something that's already happened. It seems to me that if this committee were to make a finding that the use of those scholarship funds and the manner in which they were allocated comports substantially with the process that's laid out in the CBF and the agreement, that would suffice. In other words, I don't expect someone to challenge a reasonable finding by this body. It is your job to make those determinations anyway. I mean, the timing is less than ideal, but I don't know that it would. I don't know that would cause any harm.
I guess
That makes any sense.
the question is, Ruben, can you hear me okay? The question is, should the body itself delineate the process, because that would involve, I think, then another full commission vote and a full council member vote. Or we at a point at the stage that it's been allocated that there's, I think, how many $2,000 scholarships and a $2,000 receptions, that we've already been kind of tasked with this. And I mean, of course, we'll come back to our governance and get blessings on the process. Or should James and I take a stab at it, in other words, and make a recommendation on how to move forward with these scholarships and how to plan a ceremony? Or is it something that requires board vote again, the actual process?
I mean, it seems to me, Kristen, that you and the city manager enjoy a fair amount of discretion and leeway in managing your own money and your own people and your own operations. It certainly would not, I don't think it would be a bad idea, and I'm open to hearing Joan's suggestions. I don't think it would be a bad idea to proceed in the manner that you suggested, that you and the city manager come up with a process and then maybe get it blessed by this body, as opposed to taking it to the city council on one end and the harbor commissioners on the other. We are talking about funds that are jointly being used and spent, correct, for essentially what sounds to me like one of the purposes that's been laid out in the CBF. That is, this group has made a determination that it will benefit both the city and the harbor district.
Yeah, because it was pretty, I think, if I can do math correctly here, it was 4 2,000 scholarships and 1 2,000 reception. So that was the direction. So we just got to kind of figure out how we're going to award it. So maybe we need to flush some stuff out and bring it back here and see if you like it.
8-1,000.
I think it's
Yeah.
8-1,000.
Oh, 8-1,000, is that what we decided?
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
what the slide showed
Okay.
that you had, so
Okay.
we can confirm that. But I
Okay.
think essentially, if everybody is okay with it here, Kristen and I can put it together
Yeah.
and then either come
Bring it
back.
back,
Yeah, bring
yeah.
it back to this group and make sure we're comfortable. I do feel like it's hard to speak for the council, but I think if this group is comfortable with it, I think we're comfortable with it.
Because it's already been voted
Yeah,
by
right.
both full boards.
Exactly.
Okay.
And by putting it together, you mean the scholarship, the criteria for the scholarship?
Yeah, and all the details, I think, really, a plan for it.
Does anything pop at you that you want us to think about when we do it?
Yeah, is there any priority?
Yeah.
Residents of the city of Port Hueneme?
Well, can we
a
hear
good
from the brain behind the scholarship idea?
I believe, just to maybe answer,
wait.
answer any Brown Act
Is this-
concerns,
yeah.
I believe that because this is a public notice meeting, that Joan, you might not know all the players yet, but a council member who is previously on this committee, who's still a council member, so technically would be a third council member, but I believe he could still speak because this is a noticed public meeting as a, just as a resident, but Ruben's making a face, so maybe that's a no.
So,
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. All due respect to the council member in the room, I would, and obviously I'll let the city attorney offer the advice to the council member, but I believe there would be a Brown Act issue. Although this is a noticed meeting of a Brown Act body, it does have 2 members of the city council on it. I would worry about a third member of the harbor commissioners being present at this meeting and offering an opinion.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be noticed as a city council meeting because it'd be a majority of the council.
Come on, as far as criteria, you just Google it. It's simple
We'll
thing.
put together a draft and
Okay.
bring it
It's
back.
a easy-
All right,
easy thing to do.
Well, Commissioner, there was a vision to it, though. We want to be respectful and mindful of that. So we can follow up outside of this, too, with the brain.
Well, and I heard the one that I personally appreciate. I don't get a vote, but I heard the comment about City of Hueneme residents, and I would love to run with that if that's okay with
no,
everybody.
absolutely. I think
Yeah.
he wants that as well,
Okay.
as be City of Hueneme residents,
Okay.
students.
Thank you.
Perfect. So do we need to vote on that motion to give you permission to run? Okay.
I don't think so.
All right, we are moving forward. Anything further on this?
The date for the DC trip, do we want to start talking about that, or is it too early to talk about that?
It might not be a bad idea to at least discuss a window, and then we can reach out to the consultants in Washington that
Yeah.
helped in the past. And just a question on that, too, for those that traveled before and we reconcile, make sure everybody got whole from the last trip. I just want to make sure everyone
Yeah.
got whole
Yes.
from the last
Is
trip.
September still a good time? We went September last year. Is
Mhm.
that still, I think it was the second week. Do you have anything going on in September?
I don't think so, but I had a question. If
Sure.
we can talk about the DC trip, but
Mhm.
so, and this is just the way my brain, so y'all just forgive me for the question. So, do we not want to even talk about how the value that we would like these organizations to receive? Is that something we'll do at the very end, or I don't know if it would be part of the thinking process on whether someone should be on the list or not?
So we've done it both ways. In the past, we've actually come forward. I know the last brainstorming we had with our board, we came out with recommended funding and then left like half of it for, so that's one way to do it. Or we could just bring the list in, deliberate, make some recommendations, and bring it back. There's two ways to do it.
Process check. for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was how it was last year. Actually, you put in, the port put in what they wanted to fund with amounts allocated, and there was a leftover that we allocated to what we wanted to fund.
It was about 50-50, I think.
Yeah. And there's been a pretty consistent amount
Yes.
for the past few years of what a lot of those organizations were getting. So we stick
Mhm.
around that probably.
I'm sure we share some of these because
Yeah.
they're
That's what I was
repeats.
thinking
Yeah.
as well when I was looking down the list.
That works. I think just to reiterate, I think the port was going to have their version of this yesterday, and since that didn't happen, I think we're putting the diving into this on hold for one more meeting. So,
Okay, so let me ask the question again.
sure.
So the intent.
I'm sorry,
is-
can-
Sorry. I got you, Georgiana. So,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry about that. So, so you are going to come back, this is the list that we came up with. You are going to come up with a list that you come up with. Then we will look at both lists and then determine from each list what goes on the, a list that we will approve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just kind of stretching it into two meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
and we
Um,
can, yeah.
But yeah, so the next thing was just we started to talk about the DC trip, and I think last year it was like the second week of September.
Yeah.
So, and just for anybody who wasn't on that trip, I think Kristen could probably speak to it better, but we work with the legislative analysts or legislative lobbyists. I don't think they like to be called that, but from the port, and they help set up all these meetings so that we're there and we're just back to back. It was 8 to 8 or whatever it ended up being, but just meetings, not like back to back with all the different departments. So I think the idea is we typically kind of start with a week, but then they work on it and see if they can actually make all the meetings happen that week. So, so I think the suggestion was to maybe identify a week, and then that would give them the opportunity to start working on it and see if it works for it to happen that week.
I can't remember if we did 2 or 3 days.
We did 2 days.
2
I
days.
have it on my calendar, actually. We did, it was I think we got
2
there
full-blown
Tuesday,
days.
and meetings started Wednesday and Thursday.
Mhm.
And then some
Yeah.
people left and others
Yeah.
stayed.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was the 13th and the 14th were actually the dates that we did last year.
Okay. So if it's, this would be the team, this would be the delegation, and so if that date seems okay, I can flesh it up with John O'Donnell and Kiriakis.
That looks good on my end.
Okay, Jess,
You can start there.
Commissioner?
I have to look at my schedule.
He's retired.
Very busy.
Technical question for you though, Kristen.
Yes.
Because we do have the Banana Festival on the 28th, which is a couple weeks later. Would you prefer the week before, just the first week of September, versus the second week?
It's
Or-
okay. This first or second are good. Third would get a little close.
Okay.
First and second works for me.
We're planning, the late breaking news is we're planning Beach Fest on the
Oh.
7th and 8th this year, September 7th and 8th.
So after that, second week's
Yeah,
better.
so
Second week.
Okay,
second
so
week's
let's look
better.
at that.
Okay.
Okay.
Second week.
Okay.
So we're going between both parties, both fiestas, between.
Mm-hmm. Hey, we'll catch them at DC. All right.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
I think that was.
I think there was one more item on the agenda. If
I know there was definitely future agenda requests.
yeah,
So we have a list of those. Did you make note of those
Yeah.
as well? Okay, perfect.
so is that everything for CBF related details? And then essentially we're coming back at the next meeting to whittle it down.
Mhm.
Okay. So the next item, I think we added this at our request, and it was kind of in line, and maybe it's another conversation that we can start now and finish after the visioning workshop. But we had identified some goals for the year that we wanted to work on with the port, and you guys didn't have your visioning workshop yet, but I just checked with Kristen to see if they would generally kind of sync up with the goals of the port. And so the council approved those goals and sort of has authorized, pre-authorized staff to work towards those goals in the coming year. And so there's 4 goals that we just wanted to kind of let everybody know that our intent is to work on these. But then subsequent to that, there was the council discussion last night where there was a couple of specific topics that we were asked to try to make sure we get on a joint committee meeting this year. And so the 4 goals, again, I think they're ones that we always are working on, and it's just about trying to make sure we're working on them together. And the first one is the traffic and pedestrian related safety issues, and how we can kind of work together to make our streets safer and to make the access and everything to the port safer. Second was kind of green improvements that would be beneficial to both the city and the port, and how we can support the port. I know there's some initiatives this year, and I think especially with the DC trip as an example of how we can support the port and make sure we're advocating for those in our community as well. The third was security of the city and security of the port, and how those two things are connected. And our police department is the port's police department, and so we want to make sure that we're all working together and advocating together to help do things like obtain funding related to helping our security. And then fourth is infrastructure. And when we say infrastructure, there's water and there's everything else, but I think the big one between us is going to be always streets. And I think one of the goals for us in that DC trip will be trying to advocate to try to get some funding to go towards streets that help serve our residents and also the port and its customers. So those are like the 4 big goals that I think we're just going to try to build into everything, and we're hoping that the port agrees and we can work towards those together. The council also then asked for a couple specific topics, and one was the DC trip, which we just talked about. 2 was and let me back up. The DC trip, the council, I think last year we didn't really go back to the council and tell them what we were doing in DC before we went. And so basically the ask on us is to make sure we go back and tell the council what we're doing, and we have an opportunity to collaborate on that. So we committed to that. Second, which is one that I probably should have started with a big thank you to Kristen on this, that the dredging project that Kristen and I met a couple weeks ago on some concerns we had related to dredging, and with a big thanks to Kristen kind of jumped all over it and got a bunch of important people in the room, and we had some meetings to start getting everybody on the same page on dredging. So I think that one we've already kind of illustrated. It's important to both of us, and we can work together and make some noise when it comes to getting attention for dredging. Mm-hmm. So that was one. The third is probably the one, there's a reason why it's last. It's the least comfortable, which is one of our council members made the request, but the council ultimately approved starting the conversation about our revenue sharing agreement expires in 2036. And can we have some conversation, or what's the process to have a conversation towards starting that discussion? So I think those were the 3 topics I had from last night.
And including the COLA for the.
Yeah. And the context of why it came up, I think yesterday was We reported something that I think a couple of council members had said they never heard before, and it was that we said that the CBF fund has inflation built in, CPI, right? And so that led to a conversation of, well, if the CBF fund has it, why doesn't the revenue sharing have it? And so that led to a discussion of, how do we talk about that? So it's not something to solve today, but those were the items that the committee was directed to bring forward at some point to discuss with the committee.
The only comment I would make on that is that it does include CPI, the revenue sharing agreements, because they're pure percentages. So if we're making more money by just the default, if you would, you're going to get the benefit of inflationary pressures.
That may be part of it.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that before at one point, where I told you, like, some of the questions I hear and some of the answers you had were like, yes, we do that. Yes, we do that. And so maybe one thought would just be at some point this year having an item on explaining how it works, and
Happy to do that.
we're able to walk through that.
That
So
way all the
definitely get
questions can be answered.
inflation
Yeah.
captured in that,
Yes.
those agreements. Yeah, the CFO.
If I may, we have 4 different kind of agreement, 83, 87, 95, and Convoy, and actually one more, this, community benefit fund. So 83, 87, 95 is totally based on port revenue, percentage of port revenue. So as Christine mentioned, port does well, the city does well as well. So, and another one is Convoy, obviously. All the cars convoyed over city street, we are paying per car basis.
And that one actually has a built-in inflationary thing,
Yes,
so it goes
that
up
one,
every year.
it goes up.
Yeah.
So when I first got on council, I had an initial meeting with Commissioner Rooney, and we talked about the relation to the port and how that all started, and the community benefit fund, in addition to the revenue sharing agreement. And she had made a comment that she would like to see, and that it's something that we hoped to eventually get to, is simplifying those agreements, because they're messy, they're convoluted, they're, I haven't seen them, so I can imagine there's a lot of stuff in there, but to simplify them. And that might be something we could start looking at, is just a way to simplify those agreements and making them easy to understand, and reduce a lot of the confusion and the miscommunication that might be happening because of them.
So the intent of the agenda was basically we knew we would have our workshop discussion yesterday, and we expected the port to have his, and then it was supposed to be sort of like, let's talk about what we want to talk about this year.
We had 2 down, and it just didn't make sense.
Yeah, no, so that's fine. But so I think for now, it's like, we'll take the opportunity. Those are the topics that came up with the council. And then maybe in our next meeting, we can start kind of setting a schedule for when we're going to talk about each one, or,
And that was a request as well, to have regular scheduled meetings, more consistent than what we have in the past. That way we could have more ways of communicating. And there was also a request, I'm just passing the info, so don't shoot the messenger, to have all council, all commissioner meeting, at least maybe once or twice during the year.
We have done that. It's not a bad idea. Yeah.
Have we done that recently?
We did it, I want to say, gosh, help me out, 3 years ago? Was
Okay.
2 years ago? Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's
Oh, wow.
We had a discussion around Market Street. That was a big point of
Okay.
discussion there. I remember. It's not unprecedented to do that, though. Yeah. But we'll shoot for a May meeting, if that makes sense. We'll have Michelle reach out to you and try and get something on the books, because after our next board meeting, envisioning, if that makes sense, late May. Does that sound good?
And then if I could just add something along the power of advocacy, joint advocacy efforts.
Yep.
I know that Councilmember Jean McQueen went with RDP 21 as well, with which I joined on as well, wearing my university and port hat. And we got a lot of support for the security grant, for the FEMA grant. So I think that we can't underestimate those partnerships and those joint advocacy trips with folks. You can walk away with a lot. I really appreciated Commissioner Rooney's comment yesterday about perhaps using some of the funding for a grant writer for the city, because the grants, if you've ever written a grant, oh my God, especially a federal grant, they're lucrative, but at the same time, they take a lot of resources, not only to write them, but also to manage them. So there's food for thought there on that particular one. And I think based off of our DC trip that we had last year, the opportunity is there to apply for a lot of joint grants together. So I think that that is one area that I think we should seriously consider, but also the power of joint advocacy. And then, Randall, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name. Randall Thomas. So he joined us for our board meeting yesterday, and I really appreciate his comment. I asked him about what he thought about the last city council meeting where Kristen did the state of the port, and he loved it. He also made a great suggestion, which I think you elaborate a little bit on, is that it's hard for the community to know what joint efforts the port and the city are working on if we don't educate them on it. So he made a great suggestion. I really would like to know, the Community Defense Fund paid for this. It was a joint effort between the port and also the revenue sharing agreements. And then that way people are not speculating, that the city and the port don't have a good relationship, or one's benefiting and the other one isn't. When in reality, there's a lot of work that's being done behind the scenes that benefits everyone. But if you don't know, you're going to come up with your own story. So I really appreciate you joining our meeting and giving us that feedback and input. Thank you.
Nothing further? Any thoughts over here?
Not at all. Good meeting.
All right,
Can
then.
can I mention one last thing? Kristen and I checked in real quick today, so I didn't get a chance to talk to you guys, and she probably didn't have a chance to talk to her board, so I'm maybe catching everybody off guard. But especially when we have the meetings in council chambers, it's very easy for us to record the meetings and just hit record on the button. And so that's come up a couple times in our conversations with in our council meetings and asks of the public, or even a couple of the council members have asked that. And so when we have the meetings here at our building, and I guess I'm talking about this under other community and port initiatives. I'm stretching that item, but when we have the meetings here at our building, is there any concern with just recording the meetings and having them available? Kind of speaking to that same point of, so that if people want to know what's going on, they know what's going on.
No, I actually had a text right before I walked in here asking if they're going to be recorded. And I wasn't sure, and I confirmed with Georgiana. But no, I don't have an issue with it.
Okay.
No issue.
Okay.
Not at all.
All right. So for us, it's just going to be like every other meeting in this building. We hit a button and it uploads to our Granicus, and they're available there. So we'll just get into that habit. So.
Okay. Nothing further. We can adjourn the meeting. I will adjourn this meeting at 4:42.
Thank you.
Thank you.